a difficult thing for him to make sense of this. I mean, it was such a different country, and when you think about it, also all the way around the world from where he started out. Well, after that, eventually, oh, that's a Chinese junk, the kind of boat he would have traveled in along the coast. This is a portrait of Kublai Khan, who was the ruler just before he got there. An example of Chinese portraiture, which he admired, actually. He was amazed at how lifelike their portraits were. Of course, there wasn't much of a tradition of portrait making in the Middle East. There was kind of a taboo against, representational images. So this was one of the things that he found surprising in China. Well, finally, he made his way all the way back. Return journey through India, Persia, Iraq, Syria, and so on, all the way back to North Africa. He made his final pilgrimage to Mecca. By the time he returned to Tangiers, he was 45 years old and he'd been away for 24 years. Both his parents had died. Quite a journey. But it wasn't the end of things, in fact, for him. He did go on 2 more journeys. I don't have a map for the first one. He went to the Andalus, which was Muslim Spain. There was a rumor that a Christian king planned to attack Gibraltar. The name Gibraltar is actually from Arabic, Jebel Tariq. It's the place where Tariq, a Berber conqueror, first landed to conquer Spain in the name of the Islamic Caliphate, the Umayyads. There was a rumor that the Christians were planning to take Gibraltar, so he went with sort of a volunteer army to defend Gibraltar against attack. But as it turned out, the Christian king died of the plague, so he went back to being a tourist. And he traveled all around Muslim Spain. He then, and his final journey was one of the most arduous, he went to West Africa, the Kingdom of Mali, all the way down to Timbuktu and areas around there. I've actually been to Timbuktu. It's an interesting place. This took him across the Sahara. I mean, between Morocco and Mali and these other West African countries is the Sahara Desert, which is, really hot. Difficult travel for him. Mali was an immensely wealthy country. They had gold. Not to mention all sorts of other things, like they sort of monopolized all the trade from stuff from sub-Saharan Africa, ivory and slaves and so on. But mostly they had gold. And Ibn Battuta was very disappointed to discover that despite the fact that they had a lot of gold, they weren't very hospitable to him. He was used to sort of first-class accommodations everywhere he went, being able to say, I'm a great traveler, I've been all over the world, and the local ruler would give him a nice place to live. They didn't really do that for him in Mali, and he was kind of grumpy about it. That's the extent of his travels, and he finally came back after about 29 years on the road. He obviously had the travel bug, and he obviously just did enjoy going to different places and seeing new things. A lot of what he reports, I mean, the main reason that I think a lot of people love reading the travels of Ibn Battuta is that it's very entertaining. I mean, there are colorful, vivid reports of all these places around the world. It's like reading a travel magazine or something, except a travel magazine from the 14th century, things that you and I would never see. He writes a lot about the dangers. Travel wasn't easy. There were bandits, there were pirates. In fact, he lost everything at one point off Sri Lanka to pirates, including all his books and his notes. There were storms and shipwrecks, wars and political unrest, famines. He traveled through, freezing regions in Russia and then across the Sahara, And there was also disease. Right near the end of his travels, the Black Plague hit, the bubonic plague, massive, I think probably the largest epidemic in history. It swept from Mongolia all the way to Europe. And in urban centers, killed often around a third of the population. And the Middle East was very, very urban, so a lot of people died. He describes, he was in Damascus when it hit. He describes around 2,000 deaths a day in Damascus. He also describes a public procession in which Muslims, Jews, and Christians all marched, all carrying their holy books, begging God for mercy and forgiveness. It was a horrible time, a very difficult time. So yeah, all the more amazing that one could make all these travels in a time like that. He also, well, he was a bit of a tourist, and he loved to describe the wonders that he had seen. He tried to visit every point of interest. He saw the remains of the lighthouse of Alexandria, built by Alexander the Great, which is now completely gone. The Egyptian pyramids, things like that. A lot of course, Islamic sites, like the Dome on the Rock, the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, which we thought was the greatest mosque on earth. He visited the Alhambra Palace in Granada, which you can still see today. And I mentioned the Qutb Minar, the world's tallest minaret at the time, in Delhi. But also some things that most of us haven't heard of, like in Sri Lanka, there's a place called Adam's Peak, where there's a big indentation in the earth that, well, Muslims believe it's the footprint of Adam. Buddhists believe it's the footprint of Buddha. Hindus believe it's the footprint of Shiva. So there's a certain amount of disagreement. But oddly enough, all three groups like to visit this spot. So yeah, he was a tourist of sorts. He described a lot of cultural practices, of course, along his way. His personality comes through. He had a lot of idiosyncrasies. Among other things, he was something of a gourmet. People were feeding him all along the way. He has long descriptions of food, especially melons for some reason. He's kind of crazy about melons. And finally, yeah, a lot of his descriptions do involve mystical experiences. There are numerous examples of the karamat, or wondrous powers of Sufi sheikhs and saints along the way. And it's important to note how much of the text is devoted to this. Because sometimes in the descriptions of Ibn Battuta, it gets kind of secularized along the way, especially treating him as a world explorer. He was a traveler, certainly, but also it was in fact these mystical experiences that he seemed to feel were constant reminders of a kind of divine order and his own destiny. Right, so that's in a nutshell, those are his travels. I'm beginning to realize we're going kind of long, so. Oh, this is the great mosque at Jenne. It's actually not Timbuktu where he visited in Mali, but nearby. It was also a great center of Islamic learning. Just to give you an idea of what the architecture looked like, it's really interesting that mosques and other buildings look like giant sandcastles. And it's actually beautiful because the whole city of Jenne is done in this style. So you look out over a rooftop, you see sandcastles as far as you can see. That's just an astrolabe, as part of an astrolabe, which is a device used for navigation. Okay, well, I don't want to make this go super long, so let me just say a few things. I mentioned that sort of central authority had collapsed. I was going to say a little more about that, but yes, it had been collapsing for some time. I mean, the Abbasid Empire had broken up. The Middle East was not one single state anymore. It had been broken into many little smaller kingdoms and principalities. But the final blow came with the Mongols. The Mongols swept through the Middle East in the 13th century and in fact sacked Baghdad in 1258, which was a shattering blow for the Islamic world, because Baghdad was really seen as being the center of the caliphate, a center of learning and culture and so on. The destruction of Baghdad was a massive blow. So on the one hand, he was traveling around 100 years after the collapse of that central authority, and the Islamic world was still trying to deal with that. Among other things, they were trying to deal with, well, half the Islamic world was living under the rule of the people who had in fact destroyed the Middle East, of various different groups of Mongols, who had converted to Islam, but as I said, to varying degrees, right? Mr. Ibn Battuta was very pleased with the Il Khan, who he felt was a good Muslim, but he was less impressed with some of the other Mongols who would have drinking parties and so on. Of course, the caliphs used to sometimes have drinking parties too, but that's beside the point. They had not assimilated fully, he felt. So we have on the one hand this power vacuum, this collapse of central authority. On the other hand, there were all sorts of things still binding the Islamic world together. And these became more prominent with the collapse of central authority. And they all sort of come up in one way or another in his travels.